Welcome to the Humans Against Poor Scholarship Summer Grant Interviews. Each one of our interviewees is competing for a $2,000 grant to help fund their summer research. Do you want to have a say in who gets funded? Become a H.A.P.S donor today by visiting www.hapsfunds.com/donate. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Digital Hammurabi. This is the second H.A.P.S kind of check-in interview of the season, 2 of 3. And today I am joined by Peter Johnson. Peter is a student at the New York Institute of Fine Arts, and he was one of our successful candidates for this year's summer grant. So Peter, hi. Thank you for coming back. It's nice to see you again.
It's very good to see you again as well, and happy to be back after a fruitful summer.
Oh, I like hearing that very much. Could you, just for those who didn't catch your first interview, introduce yourself and tell everyone what your personal specialization is?
Of course, yeah. So again, my name is Peter Johnson. I'm a PhD candidate here at NYU's Institute of Fine Arts. I'm an art historian and archaeologist of Northeast Africa, and I look specifically at the cultural exchange between Egypt and Nubia.
Excellent, thank you. And what were your summer plans that you were applying for research for grant money for?
Yeah, so I having just recently reached candidacy. I'm in the very exciting research stage of compiling evidence for my dissertation. And so this summer, I specifically was working in North American museum collections, and the H.A.P.S grant really allowed me to go specifically to Boston and spend an extended period of time working at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. My research project more broadly looks at, again, cultural exchange between Egypt and Nubia from roughly 663 to 404 BC. And so I was able to work with a number of pieces of sculpture in the Museum of Fine Arts Boston collection. And I would love to show some photos if you're open to that.
Please do. That would be wonderful.
Yeah. Let me share my screen with you all. Okay, let's see. So I'll kind of rush through. I included my previous presentation from the interview process, but here at the end, I have some nice photos. It was a little bit of a cool summer day this day when I took the photo, when I graciously had one of the curatorial assistants also take a photo of me. But it was really a great experience. The MFA put me up in their collections. You can see they have a really nice working space. And part of my project is really looking at Nubian influence in Egypt after the end of Egypt's 25th dynasty. And for those who are unfamiliar, Egypt's 25th dynasty is famously known as the period where Egypt was ruled by Nubian kings. However, after the expulsion of the Nubians by the Assyrians, the history of kind of Nubian presence in Egypt is not very well written. And so my project is really to look at the artistic influence and kind of persisting kind of Nubian presence in Egypt through the objects that are left behind. And I'm specifically looking at sculpture. So a lot of the photos I'll show you are images of sculpture, some small scale, some large scale. And so I look a lot at morphology and physiology as I argue that's really a crucial way that we're able to chart Nubian identity in how the body is being molded and also things like facial features and physiognomy. So the Met has a really large Nubian collection. Actually, I believe I've heard it called the largest collection of Nubian art outside of Sudan. And so I was really grateful to be able to work with some of these sculptures. As much of it is off view. So I spent a protracted period of time just doing close looking, drawing, taking measurements, and looking at things like you see here, kind of with how the legs are modeled. And you can see also I've taken some nice slide photographs. I also had access to some of these very large scale sculptures of Nubian kings. You can see that much of the style here is kind of what many people would call Egyptianizing, right? It's Egyptian in influence, yet I'm really looking at what pieces we can extract that are Nubian. And so, again, looking very closely at small elements like cap crowns, double uraeus, the cobra decoration on the crown itself. Also kind of modeling here, for example, of the sandals, right? Which areas have been incised or burnished on these stones, and how do they change over time? So again, you can see I've also been looking a lot at garments, and with these sculptures, I'm really looking at what clothes these individuals wear. My period kind of moves into the Saite period in Egypt, which is a period of Persian influence. And so I'm looking also at how these Nubians are coming into contact with the Persians. And much of the art historical literature really looks at Persian objects and has a hard time identifying them. And so part of this work is to try to pull out, which aspects in the sculpture are Nubian, which are Persian, and how is foreign influence really kind of making its mark in Egypt during this kind of murky time. We have a hard time really pulling out, what does it mean for an Egyptian to identify themselves as an Egyptian in this kind of multicultural space? So I include these two on this slide together because I'm looking at some things like the representation of the various garments these individuals wear. And as I mentioned, also looking a lot at facial features, right? How are kind of the nasolabial folds being carved? Uh, are the kind of what are the proportions of the ears to the eyes? Also, kind of the lips. So each of these I thought was a really nice indicative example. And I end with this because this was a really enigmatic ceramic figurine that came to my attention and also opened some kind of windows or doors for where my research is headed. And this is a figurine from Naucratis and is also kind of speaking to some of the Greek influence that we start to see in Egypt during this period. Yet the garment, again, and the stance are what many people have called as Persian in influence. So I'm kind of charting some of these forms, postures, garments, physiological features over, again, kind of this 200 plus year period in Egypt to kind of chart the Nubian influence and kind of multiculturalism that arises during a period when we're having a really hard time, really, again, piecing out what it means to say be Egyptian. So that's kind of just some of the photos I took and thought would be a nice little introduction for where things are going. But I think what was really exciting about working at the MFA in Boston is, again, it introduced me to this really great trove of material. And it set, again, kind of my path forward for limiting my evidence set. And for anyone, who's writing a dissertation or who's worked on this research, that's always kind of the hardest task, right? Is there's so much out there. How can you really, tell the story and, establish your research project in a way that's digestible and something that you can carry out within limited time. So I also am excitingly going to be working at the ISAC in Chicago this coming month. And so I'll have an opportunity to look at some of the collections there to continue kind of my North American tour, if you will.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. I have a couple of questions based on what you've said. What exactly does it mean to go and work in a museum collection for people who don't really have that kind of experience?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, it's different in every museum, right? So, some museums have all of their collections on display. So sometimes it's being in the galleries, right? But the work I was doing specifically in Boston was working in a basement, usually a windowless room, and I had a list of objects that I had previously determined were within kind of the scope of my research. Again, all of them not on view. So things that had come up in articles I had read, or archaeological reports, or maybe even found on the museum website. And then the curators or curatorial assistants were able to pull these objects for me, and I was able to again either take photos of them if they had not been photographed. I was able to take measurements of them, and again spend a really protracted period of time looking. And this is something that is really important for my research as an art historian, is thinking about specifically with sculpture, every mark is an intentional mark of manufacture. The artist is really deciding, in every instance, why are they, molding the face in a certain way? Why are they adding or not adding decoration? And so, especially when I'm kind of looking at these various types of sculpture or physical forms, a lot of what I'm doing is also kind of doing a comparative mental exercise. So, okay, one artist has chosen here to model the face this way, another has not. And so I'm keeping kind of extensive, I do written notes, but I also have a database on my computer as well. So I'm able to kind of build my own corpus on the computer while having the object right in front of me. So it's a very kind of solitary work, again, kind of in these kind of dusty basements. But I think it's really crucial because, again, for so many of these objects, they are just not on view. And so it allows access to really kind of record a lot of the details that maybe were missed or just were not maybe important to other scholars who've looked at them.
And do you have a feel for how many objects you're going to end up with for the whole of your dissertation project?
That's a great question. The kind of scale I'm looking at currently will likely be around 80 objects. So it is a corpus that I'm kind of intentionally crafting myself, right? So some people in their dissertations, have a corpus that's kind of defined for them already based on place or time. Um, I am somewhat limited again by the word limit of of my dissertation. We do have a cap, and so what I'm really trying to do is find some indicative examples that allow me to again kind of chart this story I want to tell about identity and place during this 200 plus year period. So right now, I think it's going to come in around 80, but you say that, and then you come across others that can really add to that. But I'm setting that limit for myself so I can have something that feels not outside of kind of a digestible amount.
And how do you determine, like, what's your criteria for deciding which objects get included and which do not? Is it just this is what I feel to be the best example of a trend I'm seeing, or are there other criteria?
Yeah, so originally had kind of a much broader scope, and probably maybe when I spoke earlier in the semester or earlier in the year, I was talking about kind of objects of self presentation as maybe how I discussed them, and I was looking at relief, and I was maybe looking at uh, other forms as well, and I really kind of limited that just to sculpture to give myself again more of a limit. And yeah, for me, I'm specifically thinking about form. Form is kind of the main driver when I'm deciding what goes in the corpus. So, kind of morphology and physiology of the human body.
Thank you. I have one more question. What are your plans for the immediate future? You said you were going to Chicago. Once that's done, what will you be doing?
Yeah, so I'll be in Chicago for ASOR. So very excited to be giving a talk, a little bit of an update on my research for anyone who will be there. I'll be speaking. But actually, before that, I'll be in Cairo. So I'll be in Cairo at the end of October into the first week of November. There's a really nice conference being organized at the French Archaeological Institute on reuse. And so another interest of mine is spolia and reuse. And so I'll be giving a talk on pharaonic fragments that were integrated into Muslim monuments in the medieval period. So a little outside of this project, but really excited to be doing that. And then, as I mentioned, we'll be in Chicago doing a little bit of work at ISAC, and then also hoping to do a little collections work here in New York at the Brooklyn Museum before January, where I will be headed back to Egypt and joining an archaeological project at the site of Abydos.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. That all sounds really exciting. And I have to say, reuse of sculpture and archaeological remains is fascinating. So I hope that presentation goes really well.
Thank you. I'm really excited.
It sounds wonderful. And I have no more questions, and there are no questions from the audience, so I will let you go. Thank you again,
Awesome.
Peter, for joining us.
Of course, and thank you all for your support. It really was transformational in my own work, so I appreciate it.
I'm really glad we could help. Good luck with the rest of your project.
Thank you.
Bye.